Our sign language interpreter is William Silla. Now, the European Union has reduced the amount of monthly allowances paid to soldiers serving under the AMISOM force in Somalia, a move likely to affect their morale in fighting the Al-Shabaab militants. This as President Uhuru Kenyatta, while addressing the AU summit in Ethiopia, pitched for more powers for AMISOM. And as Murimi Mwangi now reports, the UN Secretary General Ban Ki-moon called on the global community to assist Africa in fighting Al-Shabaab and Boko Haram.
As Kenya and AMISOM continue to review details of the devastating Elada KDF base attack, President Uhuru Kenyatta has now raised concern that the Al-Shabaab has changed tact and asked the global community to review the AMISOM mandate in Somalia, giving the troops more powers to go after the enemy. Sentiments which UN Secretary General Ban Ki-moon seemed to take note of, as he pledged on the need for the global community to assist Africa cripple the Boko Haram in West Africa and Al-Shabaab in East Africa.
I applaud the efforts of AMISOM to stabilize the country and support peaceful elections. In the Great Lake Chad Basin, I welcome your support for the collaboration between countries affected by Boko Haram's campaign of terror.
This as Department of Defense spokesperson Bogita Ongeri confirmed that KDF had relocated its Elada military base from ground zero of the attack to a new base, but is yet to redeploy soldiers there.
This is from
AMISOM Force Acting Commander Major General Nakibus Lakara earlier this week visited the ill-fated camp, where he indicated that AMISOM troops were reviewing details of the attack to lay fresh strategies before embarking on a major strike back at the Al-Shabaab.
AMISOM is not a peacekeeping mission. AMISOM is a war-fighting mission. So from deployment, you know you've come to fight. And in a fight, of course, there are casualties. But what is important for AMISOM is to ensure that those casualties are to the minimum.
Bogita says KDF has redirected its efforts to track down soldiers who have been missing since the attack, and that the Department of Defense has not yet received any ransom demands from the Al-Shabaab in regards to the missing soldiers, adding that KDF had completed recovery of all the bodies and that 80% of them had been positively identified. This even as more families drain in grief in the desperate search for their loved ones.
We are emboldened to pursue this enemy to wherever he goes.
And for the Somali people to note that this happened, but AMISOM is back on the ground.
But the AMISOM force may now have hit a major roadblock in the war to liberate Somalia, after the European Union slapped the troops with a 20% pay cut. AMISOM Chief Francisco Jose Madera has said the cut will have serious adverse effects on the morale of the soldiers. And this pay cut is a major blow to AMISOM, which also needs state-of-the-art military equipment for the volatile mission in Somalia. Murimi Mwangi, KTN News in Nairobi.
South Africa and the world today watched with amazement as the outgoing chairman of the African Union, Robert Mugabe, blasted the United Nations, accusing it of having imperialist tendencies. Though not the first time he was taking on the UN and the West for what he called sidelining the African continent, Mugabe's speech appeared to have more venom today as he threatened to mobilize the continent to ignore the United Nations if reforms are not instituted at the Security Council.
The 26th session of the African Union Summit brought forth another dispensation meant to chart the way forward for the African continent. The forum also saw the end of a one-year term for 94-year-old Robert Mugabe, who handed over the union's chairmanship to Chad President Idris Deby. But Mugabe would not bow out of the stewardship of the union without another salvo of his characteristic no-holds-barred slamming of the West, and this time particularly the United Nations.
This is the body of respected people, the body of Africa. So I wonder whether you have told them that we also are humans.
Mugabe said that he would urge African states to withdraw from the United Nations if reforms were not done in its Security Council to include African states, urging that 2 African states needed to be included in the decision-making process of issues dealing with peace in the African continent.
If we decide, as we shall certainly do so one of these days, that down within the United Nations we are not members of it, others are real members of it, we are artificial members of it, and we can't continue to be artificial members of it.
The president of Zimbabwe hit out at the United Nations, claiming that most of its member states did not have any interest in issues affecting the African continent. His fiery statement coming barely minutes after the speech by UN Secretary General Ban Ki-moon.
I will continue to give you my strongest support until I leave this privileged position and hand over to my successor. Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, let us work together to make this world better for all, for our succeeding generations.
If the United Nations is to survive, we must be equal members of it.
The summit, sharply focusing on gender issues and women empowerment, comes on the backdrop of several challenges facing the continent, especially on matters terror and the current civil crisis affecting Burundi. Timothy Otieno, KTN News.
The Kenya Revenue Authority has dismissed claims that politics advised the move to close 2 container depots associated with Mombasa Governor Ali Hassan Joho. This as more leaders in Mombasa continue to read malice into the closure. KTN's Francis Ontomo reports.
For the third day, the 2 container freight stations remained closed, even as Kenya Revenue Authority issued a press statement to clarify why the decision to close the depot was taken. Commissioner General Joseph Njiraini says there was no malice, as claimed by owners of the facilities, instead reaffirming that this is an ongoing process to spur efficiency on the operation of container stations across the country. The argument that there was a scheme by the stations to evade taxation is one that has attracted criticism.
We have no control of the cargo in the CFSs. The cargo in the CFSs, as long as it has not been released by customs, belong to customs.
The affected farm is wondering why the 2 depots were singled out, arguing many others have been found with contraband goods.
To ascertain who is the owner, it is easy. You just need to identify the containers, which are the numbers. From there we can trace from the system who the importer is.
Local leaders read politics, saying this move has everything to do with political differences between Governor Ali Hassan Joho and Jubilee leadership.
Kwa hivyo sababu hii ni ya kisiasa peke yake. Na mimi nataka kumwambia Governor Joho ashikilie hapo hapo kama kiongozi wetu wa Pwani na deputy party leader wa ODM wa Kenya nzima.
President Uhuru Kenyatta led state organs in the destruction of goods at Mwakirunge, in perhaps a show of commitment to ending illegal importation. However, owners of these facilities say KRA should carry the cross when such happens.
The responsibility of ascertaining what is inside a container is a KRA function, purely a KRA function.
But even as this storm continues to spin, it is becoming clear that hundreds of youths may soon lose their jobs should the stalemate not be sorted out amicably. Francis Ontomwa, KTN News, Mombasa.
To a love story now, and the remains of an elderly couple in Kitui County were today laid to rest in the same grave in line with the couple's wish. Malonza Ngambi, who died aged 101, and his 94-year-old wife Elizabeth Mukeli are said to have demonstrated immense love for each other for the 76 years that they were married. They died within 3 days of each other. Trix Ngado reports.
Till death do us part, the marriage vows lovers make as they tie the knot. But for this couple, not even death would separate them. Their grand love that inspired many would follow them to the grave. The The deceased, Malonza Ngabi, aged 101 years, and his wife Elizabeth Mukeli, 94, shared 76 years of blissful marriage, with many attesting to their unwavering love for one another over the years. It is perhaps this grand love that had them leave instructions in their will to be buried together, instructions their family carried out faithfully today. A rare but symbolic send-off that will not be forgotten anytime soon by residents of Yoani village in Kitui Central who attended the funeral in their hundreds.
These people married together, 1940s, they have lived together. They were just like Chanda na Pete. All the time they're together, until they became sick together.
Malonza and Elizabeth died within 3 days of each other.
Now what I can say is that we know we call ourselves darling, darling, darling. But portray the darling like these ones.
Wametusomesha maneno mingi sana. Asa kifamilia, sisi tuna haki ama tuna kitu ya kujifunia.
The funeral turned celebration of love unabated for decades on end, coming at a time when divorce and separations are at an all-time high. The lovebirds leave behind 6 children, 25 grandchildren, and 15 great-grandchildren. Trix Ingado, KTN News, Nairobi.
Indeed, love beyond the grave, and may their souls rest in eternal peace. Now, it was a celebratory mood as residents of Kenya's POKOT INITIATION constituency marked a vital occasion in their tradition, an event that they say has been pushed to the back burner for 28 years due to insecurity in the area. More than 260 boys have been initiated into manhood, and here's Kamche Menza with those details.
As the sun rises, we witness the boys joining the elders at the venue on this Ngetonuo celebration. The boys have stayed in the bush for 1.5 months, enduring the harsh climate while facing the knife. The covering on their faces symbolic of respect for their mothers and sisters. From a distance, one would have thought that the initiates are fighting among themselves. But in reality, they are giving one bull a thorough beating until it dies. They say this is one of the major steps into the initiation.
Si tunafuata kitamaduni kama babu zetu toka zamani. Kama alisema huwezi kuchinja, huwezi kuua.
Then the bull is slaughtered and shared among women and men. The initiates only get a piece of this skin. They say it will give them an identity with the elders.
Kenye ndafanya kwa saa hizi, taenda kupaka mafuta, ndavalisha shanga, ndavalisha hii kitu, nitaitoa kichwa yangu na hata na hii shanga, ndavalisha, alafu ndapatia kengele.
Skins and hides have been their attire for 1.5 months, but today they got a chance to take a bath, and no one was to make an attempt to see them. The initiates are between 6 to 30 years old.
Tulichelewa kutoka 1988 mpaka sasa 2015 kwa sababu ya mambo ya insecurity. Lakini sasa naona kama amani inaelekea.
How though did they not consider circumcision at a hospital?
Wale wameenda hospitali naitwa kama wachinga. Utamaduni ya POKOT ndio vizuri kwa sababu wako na mafunzo kubwa.
The initiates are expected to go back into the bushes for yet another night as the final process into adulthood. Though parents have expressed regret over the children's absenteeism in school.
Tutaanza kufuatilia syllabus ya shule ama kalenda ya shule. Hakuna tena kutahiri watoto kama wengine wanaenda shule.
Kamche Menza, KTN, INITIATION.